Welcome back to the deep dive. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell icon for notifications on our latest deep dives. Today, we're taking a journey into a pivotal moment in Indian history, the Swadeshi movement. Now, this deep dive isn't just for history buffs. If you're a UPSC aspirant, especially if you're new to the game, understanding the Swadeshi movement is crucial for acing your GS1 Modern Indian History paper. And for everyone else, this is just a fascinating chapter in the story of India. A story of resistance, resilience, and the birth of a nation.
You got it. The Swadeshi movement is often seen as the turning point in India's fight for independence. What's fascinating is how a seemingly dull administrative decision, the partition of Bengal, actually ignited a movement that touched every facet of Indian life: economics, politics, education, even the clothes people wore.
It's amazing how seemingly small things can spark massive movements, isn't it? So, let's rewind back to 1905. The British decided to partition Bengal. What was their reasoning? At least officially.
Officially, the British claimed it was all about improving administrative efficiency. Bengal was a huge province at the time, and they argued it was just too unwieldy to manage effectively, but many Indians saw this as a thinly veiled attempt to weaken the growing nationalist movement, particularly in Bengal.
That makes sense. Bengal.
Yeah.
Especially Calcutta. It was like the heart of nationalist activity back then.
Absolutely. You see, Bengalis were some of the first to embrace English education and, through that, were exposed to Western liberal ideas. Combine that with a growing awareness of their own cultural heritage, and you have a potent recipe for nationalist sentiment. The British, naturally, weren't too thrilled about this. They saw a united Bengal as a direct threat to their control.
So, their solution was classic divide and rule. But how did Indians initially react to this partition?
The initial response was pretty standard. Protests, petitions, public meetings, the usual toolkit. But these methods weren't having much effect. The British seemed determined to push through with the partition. That's when a new, more radical approach began to take shape.
The boycott? Now, this is where things get really interesting. The boycott wasn't simply about refusing to buy British goods, was it? There was a much deeper meaning behind it.
Exactly. This is where we get into the heart of Swadeshi, which literally means of one's own country. This movement was about so much more than just rejecting foreign-made products. It was a powerful statement about embracing Indian identity, fostering self-reliance, and laying the groundwork for a nation built by its own people.
It's like they were saying, we're not just going to oppose what you're doing, we're going to build our own alternative. And how did this boycott play out in practice?
The boycott movement caught fire. People from all walks of life joined in. They refused to buy British cloth, salt, even matches. And it had a real impact, both economically and symbolically. It showed the British that Indians were united in their opposition and willing to make sacrifices for their cause.
It's fascinating how a seemingly simple act like a boycott could have such profound implications. And I understand this wasn't just about saying no to British goods, it was also about creating something new, right?
Precisely. The Swadeshi movement spurred this incredible wave of creative energy across India. We saw the establishment of national schools and colleges, a real push to invest in homegrown industries. It was like they were building a parallel system, a challenge to British dominance in every sphere of life.
They weren't just protesting. They were actively building their own institutions. That's some serious long-term thinking. But I know there were different schools of thought within the movement itself, weren't there?
You're absolutely right, and this is an important point, especially for our UPSC aspirants out there. Broadly speaking, there were two main camps, the moderates and the extremists. Understanding the nuances of their ideologies is key.
Okay, so moderates versus extremists. What were the key differences between these two groups?
The moderates, as the name suggests, believed in a more gradual, evolutionary approach. They wanted to work within the existing system, advocating for more autonomy and representation for Indians through dialogue, petitions, and appeals to British fairness. The extremists, on the other hand, were far more radical. They demanded complete independence, Swaraj as they called it, and were willing to employ more assertive, even confrontational tactics to achieve it.
So you had these two distinct ideologies within the movement, both pushing for change, but with very different methods. I can imagine the newspapers back then were filled with heated debate.
They were. Newspapers and journals became the battlegrounds for these competing ideas. It was a truly fascinating period of intellectual ferment and a passionate debate.
And this is what makes history so captivating, isn't it? It's not just a dry list of dates and events. It's about the clash of ideas, personalities, and the human drama that unfolds. But let's not forget, this movement wasn't limited to intellectuals and politicians, was it?
Not at all. One of the remarkable things about the Swadeshi movement was its broad-based appeal. It drew in students, women, peasants, artisans, people from all walks of life contributed in their own way. It was a truly national movement.
That's incredible. And our sources describe these volunteer groups called Semitis that were doing some truly remarkable work on the ground. Can you tell us more about them?
The Semites played a vital role in spreading the message of the movement, particularly in rural areas. They organized social work, taught physical and moral training, and even used songs and literature to get their ideas across. It was a brilliant way to mobilize people at the grassroots level.
Just like they were community organizers, building a sense of solidarity and purpose. It's incredible how creative and multifaceted this movement was. But all of this must have had a lasting impact, right?
Absolutely. The Swadeshi movement had profound consequences for India, both economically and politically. It gave domestic industries, especially textiles, a huge boost. It also fostered a spirit of entrepreneurship and self-reliance that would lay the foundation for future economic growth.
And politically. I imagine this was a major step on the road to independence.
Without a doubt. The Swadeshi movement galvanized the Indian people, demonstrating the power of collective action and instilling a belief that self-rule was attainable. This is why it's so crucial for UPSC aspirants to grasp the significance of this movement. It's not just an isolated event. It's a key part of the larger narrative of India's journey toward independence.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The partition of Bengal as the catalyst, the rise of the boycott and the deeper meaning of Swadeshi, the different approaches within the movement itself, and its impact on various segments of society. This is truly a deep dive, but I have a feeling there's more to this story.
Well, there is. We need to talk about some of the complexities and challenges the movement faced, and of course, its lasting legacy.
That's for part 2. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the incredible reach and impact of the Swadeshi movement, but as with any complex historical event, it's important to acknowledge that there were also some unforeseen consequences.
Right. It wasn't all smooth sailing. I'm thinking specifically about something called the communal tangle that I came across in the research. Can you shed some light on that for us?
Of course. As the Swadeshi movement gained momentum, some leaders, particularly in Bengal, sought to broaden their base of support by appealing to religious sentiment. This strategy, while intended to unify more Indians against British rule, inadvertently created divisions between Hindus and Muslims.
So, in a way, the movement's success in uniting people against the British also became a source of internal conflict. That's a bit of a paradox.
It is. And the British, always masters of exploiting any cracks in unity, saw this as a prime opportunity. They began actively encouraging the idea of separate Muslim interests, a strategy that ultimately led to the formation of the Muslim League in 1906.
It's a stark reminder that even movements with the best intentions can have unintended consequences. It's almost like the seeds of the partition that would eventually divide India in 1947 were sown decades earlier within a movement striving for national unity.
That's a crucial insight, and it underscores why we need to study history in all its messy complexity. The Swadeshi movement wasn't a simple tale of heroes and villains. It was a dynamic, evolving period full of conflicting currents and contradictions.
Which, honestly,
yes,
is what makes it so fascinating to study, wouldn't you say? But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here. Despite those internal tensions, the Swadeshi movement had a profound and lasting impact on India. It went beyond just opposing British rule. It was about creating a new vision for India.
Exactly. It was about envisioning an India that was self-reliant, proud of its heritage, and ready to take its place on the world stage.
And that spirit of self-reliance, the very essence of Swadeshi, feels incredibly relevant even today, don't you think?
Absolutely. In today's world, dominated by global corporations and multinational brands, it's easy to forget the importance of supporting local businesses, fostering indigenous industries, and valuing our own traditions. The Swadeshi movement serves as a powerful reminder that true independence goes beyond just political freedom. It's about achieving economic self-sufficiency and having the confidence to embrace our own cultural identity.
That's a powerful message for all of us. So let's do a quick recap for our listeners. The Swadeshi movement was ignited by the partition of Bengal, which many Indians saw as a blatant attempt to weaken them. This led to a nationwide boycott of British goods, the growth of local industries, the establishment of national educational institutions, and a surge in cultural pride.
And it wasn't a movement confined to the elite. People from all walks of life participated, making it a truly national movement. We also saw the different strands of nationalist thought come to the forefront, with moderates advocating for gradual reform and extremists demanding complete independence.
We've also discussed some of the complexities within the movement, such as the rise of communal tensions despite the overall goal of unity. But at its core, the Swadeshi movement laid the groundwork for the fight for independence that was to come. It sent a clear message to the British that Indians were no longer content to be passive subjects, and it instilled a belief in self-reliance that continues to inspire generations of Indians.
And this is why. For those preparing for the UPSC exams, understanding the nuances of this movement is so vital. It's not just about memorizing dates and events. It's about understanding the intricate interplay of social, economic, and political forces that shaped modern India.
Right. It's about connecting those historical dots and seeing how they continue to influence the present. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the partition of Bengal to boycotts, from Semitis to Swaraj. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on something. We've talked about the historical significance of the Swadeshi movement, but how do you think that spirit of self-reliance, that defining characteristic of that era, is relevant in India today? What are some ways we can apply the principles of Swadeshi to address the challenges we face in the 21st century? It's something I'd love for all of us to think about.
That's a great question, and I think it's one that deserves careful consideration. The Swadeshi movement wasn't just about rejecting foreign goods. It was about embracing a mindset, a way of life that emphasized self-sufficiency, community empowerment, and a belief in our own capabilities. In many ways, those values are more relevant than ever in today's globalized world.
I completely agree. It's about rediscovering the power of local solutions, supporting homegrown talent, and fostering a sense of collective responsibility for our communities.
Exactly. If we look around us, we can see glimpses of that Swadeshi spirit alive and well today. The rise of social entrepreneurship, the growing interest in sustainable living, the emphasis on reviving traditional crafts and knowledge systems. These are all reflections of that same desire for self-reliance and a more equitable, sustainable future.
It's like history is offering us a roadmap, a set of principles that we can adapt and apply to our own time.
Precisely. And I think that's one of the most valuable things about studying history. It's not just about looking back. It's about finding inspiration and guidance for the present and the future.
It's like we've been on this incredible journey, unearthing these ideas from the past that are still so relevant today. And it really highlights what's so powerful about these deep dives. We're not just, rehashing old history. We're connecting it to the present.
I agree. You know, history isn't just a bunch of old facts and dates. It's a living narrative that shapes who we are and the choices we make. And the Swadeshi movement, with its focus on self-reliance, community action, collective will, really offers valuable lessons for today's world.
Yeah. So to wrap things up for our listeners,
Yeah.
especially those UPSC aspirants, let's bring it all together. We started with the partition of Bengal, which sparked this wave of national consciousness. And from there, we saw how the idea of Swadeshi became a symbol of self-reliance and pride. It wasn't just about saying no to British goods. It was about building something new.
Absolutely. It led to those national schools and colleges, the growth of local industries, and these powerful leaders who really shaped India's future.
And we can't forget those Semitis, those volunteer groups. They took the message of Swadeshi to the grassroots. They were so important in building that sense of community.
They really were. The backbone of the movement, mobilizing people, spreading that awareness, building unity.
It's inspiring to think about the impact. It laid the groundwork for the fight for independence, and it showed the British that Indians were a force to be reckoned with. But, like we discussed, it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Right. There were those internal challenges, like the communal tensions, which the British took advantage of. A good reminder that even well-intentioned movements can have unintended consequences.
It's a lesson in the complexities of history, those shades of gray. It's important to understand them, especially for those UPSC students really digging deep.
Absolutely. The Swadeshi movement, it wasn't just about opposing the British. It was about shaping a vision for a new India, an India that was self-reliant, proud, and ready for its destiny.
And that vision, I think it still resonates today. The spirit of Swadeshi, it's not just something from the past. It's a principle we can use now.
I think so, too. It's a call to action, to support local businesses, nurture local talent, revive those traditional knowledge systems, and build a more sustainable and equitable future.
Well said. The Swadeshi movement was a turning point for India, and its legacy is still felt. It's a reminder that true independence comes from more than just political freedom. It also comes from economic self-sufficiency and cultural confidence.
And for those preparing for the UPSC exams, keep this in mind. The Swadeshi movement wasn't just a list of events. It was a powerful force. It shaped India's social, political, and economic landscape. It's vital to understanding modern India.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's a great place to wrap up. As always, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into history.
And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you.
Yes. And if you found this deep dive helpful, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click that bell icon to stay tuned for our next deep dive.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep the spirit of Swadeshi alive.